What up, y'all? Welcome back to another episode of the Black Top Podcast. We're two-man gaming it tonight. Ruben could not make it, but that's all right. The NBA season has started. We're officially done week one of I don't know how many, but it's been a lot of crazy things going on. There's obviously a lot of players coming back, which we'll get into. Obviously, as of now, the Utah Jazz are top of the West, so you can very much tell that it's the first week of the stuff really getting to go. Christian, how you doing, Cuzzo?
I'm doing pretty good. Pretty
Very
good.
nice,
Nothing else.
very nice. But yeah, overall today we're just gonna talk about general takeaways. We're gonna reflect on some of the games, specific players, whatnot. Let's get right into it. What would you say were some of your general takeaways from opening week, Chin?
um, I'd say it's hard to say. I've been like just kind of thinking about it. I think for me, I mean, not to talk too much on the Celtics already, but I think you can just tell they are poised for a very locked in season.
Yeah, you
I
can't even
think
really
they
tell that they went through what they went through in the off season.
exactly like I feel like they're the type of team that didn't take any breaks in the summer. Like that they're the type of team that like you saw it in the last dance where Michael Jordan was fucking tired of losing. It's kind of the same thing I think with the Celtics, that same energy.
Whoa, high comparisons. I respect that.
Yep.
I
That was my
mean,
takeaway for this week.
shit. Phil, if there's one thing Phil Jackson knows, it's about entangling with ownership. Anyways, but yeah, I think the Celtics are super solid. Wholly agree with that. For me, I think more in general, I think it's been teams' abilities to grind out slash win the ugly games. Obviously, yeah, blowout games, which are always not that much fun because not really much competitive. But it's those games that are really down to the wire, or even the ones where everybody's shooting really shitty. Or for example, the first Milwaukee game, I think it's those that speak about the grit of a lot of the teams that they're coming in with. It's not about how you perform when everything's going well. I think I really want to key in on how teams are doing when shit hits the fan. I mean, a lot of moments I can think of where the Suns coming back down 20 despite Christian Wood's hot streak, especially heading into the second half. Bucks and Sixers, as I mentioned, it was a very ugly game, 90 to 88. So no motherfuckers weren't hitting their shots. The Warriors and Nuggets game the other night. Yeah, that one came down to the wire, even though it should have been in hand. But when Steph Curry and the Warriors are on the floor, there's always a chance for them. And last but not least, or not last, but the Suns are on the opposite end of this. The Blazers and the Suns game the other night. That was. Mwah. I mean, the Blazers are looking super solid. I think they're definitely going to be a team that I think it's a lot like how the Jazz are at the top, but not as unrealistic because they're a team I think that can be competitive, but it's just a
Yeah,
matter of where they're going to fall into the pecking order. I think.
for sure.
But yeah, I think just to get in my little Milwaukee bits, I think it's been a lot of. It don't really matter to me. The first game was cool. Obviously, again, it was a bit of a grinder and a slow one, but right after that, uh, or well, just to go back to the first game. I mean, it's pretty shaky. Drew, I think he went like nine for no, he had like 9 points, so he had a really bad shooting night. I like that Javon Carter's as of now solidified as a starting two. I think he's somebody that brings a lot of not versatility, but him and Drew, I think you'd be hard pressed to find a better defensive backcourt in the league at this moment. And then that second game, I swear there were like 4 or 5 possessions where Giannis went straight and ones every time. I think it showed that the Bucks are obviously not necessarily mid-season form, but they're coming into the season again. The fact that they have that continuity that other teams aren't going to have, it's allowed them to really beat up on teams that I think are coming in with a lot of new faces, i.e., a team like the Rockets who have a lot of draft guys coming in and all that stuff, and then completely manhandled them. It was over by the first quarter, but you know, it's the Rockets at the end of the day. Take that with a grain of salt as you will. But moving on from there, the comebacks. So there were a lot of players that weren't playing basketball last year who are back. I mean, I mean, the list is awesome. Jamal Murray, Michael Porter Jr., Ben Simmons, Kawhi Leonard, just to name a few. It's nice to see a lot of the familiar faces. I think it's all shaping up to be might be a hot take, but this season I think is going to be one of the most competitive and best seasons in the past little bit, I think. What do you think about that?
I think I'd agree with that take. I think it's one of those things where you kind of start to finally see a full league, and I think we haven't seen that in a while. Granted, there is going to be always players out of the league. I mean, Lamelo is already out for the first week. DJ knows how that feels
That was
because
my
he
first pick, man.
has on his fantasy team. But um, yeah, I think like even if you look at the standings right now, obviously there's only been maximum 3 games played between teams, but um, you can tell that teams are kind of already competing at a high level. It's because there's like no excuses this season besides tanking for Victor Wembanyama.
For sure, no doubt. But overall, I think the comebacks are nice because again, yeah, it's all shaping up to show it's a full league again. Uh Speaking of not really comebacks, but rookies, there have been a lot of good rookies in their debuts and their past few games. It's nice to see who would you say has been. I think you're obviously going to say the obvious one, but I'm also wondering if you have another one. I think you know who I'm thinking, but I'll let you tackle that.
All right, well, yeah, Paulo Banchero. I mean, it's been talked about, but he's been living up to the hype. And I think what's really notable is that he really hasn't been playing against like the worst of the worst teams either. I mean, despite playing Detroit, and in my personal opinion, I said this on previous episodes, I think Detroit is a competitive team this season. So I think even them like disrespecting them and be like, oh yeah, it's just Detroit you played and you got 27 points in that game, like that's impressive in his first game. And then he's scored 20 in Atlanta and 23 in Boston, who in my opinion is the best team in the NBA right now. Um, and I mean, logistically, they are. But he's obviously been showing up. I think one person I am keeping my eye on in terms of rookies is probably Walker Kessler. Um, I think he's someone who his ambulance is in the back.
Surrey, man.
Praying for those people.
Yeah.
But no, Walker Kessler is someone who I think has been getting like very limited burn on the floor, but when he shows up on the floor, he's been producing.
Yeah, he double
Uh,
doubled in his first game, didn't he?
who did, yeah. And I think he's someone to definitely keep an eye out for. I know DJ has one Ricky in mind, and I'll let him talk on that though.
Yeah, I guess I got two little ones I can spiel on. First of all, Paulo is he's looking as advertised, generational. I think it was 29, 5 and 5. That was the first time that stat line appeared since LeBron, and dude's a bigger LeBron with a better shooting motion. I'm not saying he's going to be LeBron, but I digress. My rookies I want to show some love to is first of all, a guy that I think is very much a dark horse, but has a big chance to win Rookie of the Year. I feel Keegan Murray. I mean, he didn't play the first game because he's coming off of COVID or whatever that was protocols, but first game 19 5 and 2 with 2 blocks. Second game 16 and 4 with a steal. This guy fearless. He's taking a lot of like the veteran type of shots. His three balls falling at a decent clip, I think. And I mean, again, he's not taking those standstill threes because I mean I saw one possession where it was one of those fading threes, like a la like Dame shoots a lot of fading threes. I think not obviously he's a bit bigger than that, but Keegan Murray, he's not starting right now, but there's no way he doesn't start. I don't think he's got to go past KZ Okpala. Keegan Murray just got to prove a bit defensively, and that's his spot right there. And then the other guy, speaking of Detroit, Cade Cunningham's running mate, Jaden Ivey, super duper solid. I think again, it gives that team another dynamic for them to be competitive, and then their whole rookie class is looking solid. Jalen Duran's like really spectacular. I think the main thing about Jaden Ivey though is when he came into the draft, I think a big weakness that anybody would point out was his 3-point shooting or lack thereof. But you know, 1 and 2 his first 3 games. It's not nothing special, but I think it's what really makes him. How would I word this? Okay, if you think about Russell Westbrook, nobody's gonna come up on his shot because they don't respect it. I think Jaden Ivey's not necessarily exactly the same, but I think it's that same boat where the scouting report's not going to say this guy's going to knock it down from three, but by you showing the ability to even hit one, maybe two, it's going to keep the defense honest. It's not going to allow them to really, cheat off of you as much. And I think Jaden Ivey's shown that, and you know, they're looking solid. Obviously, their only real win is against, or the only win is against the one of the worst teams statistically in the Magic, but it's looking bright, I will say. From there, let's talk about what teams are looking good and bad. I think first one I want to show some love to the Portland Trailblazers. I don't know if I said it on the pod, but when it comes to a Western Conference team, that's kind of the people I roll with. I mean, they're just whole. I love the makeup of their team. I think it's just a bunch of those sort of ragtag team of unwanted players, and they're coming together to hoop. I mean, Josh Hart was somewhat of a throwaway in that AD trade. Uh, People don't respect Jeremy Grant because obviously he was being injured for the past bit and putting up, you could say, empty stats in Detroit. But that team's nice. Anthony Simons, I love Anthony, man. I mean, hasn't been shooting the ball particularly well, but as Dame said, we got to put his big boy pants on, and he showed up in big moments. He's coming off 2 games where he had back to back like clutch buckets. The Lakers game, I think he had, if not the no, he had the one before the game winner, and then in the game before that, he had the game winner with the hook shot, which not many guards can do, I would say. So Anthony Simons might, I don't think I'm penciling him from MIP, but he's one of the guys I think are in the running. And speaking of a team that's bad, uh, I'd probably just say the Lakers. Obviously they're still getting all those bullshit like primetime games. So a lot of the games I do catch because I'm not able to watch like right at the beginning, and they just look so fucking nasty. There's no shooting. It's all a bunch of ISO bullshit, and then it's just not nice. Like I think we could probably do a whole episode about shitting on them, but I don't really want to do that. But Jim, what about you? What you thinking?
Um, yeah, I think I don't really want to talk about the Lakers right now because yeah, I 100% agree. I think they have like potential. I mean, I truly believe in Russell Westbrook. I don't think he's far
You don't
past
think
like
he's cooked?
I don't think he's like out. I just think the team morale and like kind of how they're kind of working with their guard rotation right now is just a little dicey when you kind of think about I guess the just sort of the integrity of the team itself. I mean, I think Russell Westbrook, of course, is not an efficient shooter, and that's why he's kind of playing like as an on and off starter, like 6 man position at this point. Um, but I definitely think like they're kind of in a perception, and now I'm talking about the Lakers, but they're kind of in this perception where I don't know, they think Patrick Beverly is like a more kind of balanced player for the starting lineup, but I personally think it's like I would go with Russ, like, and I think it's just like kind of like building up that like for the lack of a better word, like dog mentality within like their starting three that can actually like do something together if they just pulled it together. But I think they just don't have a good head on their shoulders right now,
Do you think it's
and
fixable?
I'm not sure if that's something that I personally think it's fixable. I mean, if it's not fixable, I blame it on LeBron.
Oh,
I
the
think
GM.
I mean LeBron. I feel has been crowned you know in some people's eyes the best player in the league ever to grace the game, and I just think he should be able to do a bit more with the talent he has pretty much curated around him. Anyways, talking about the best teams in the league, I've already touched on the Celtics. I do think the noticeable thing for me is that the best teams in the league are the teams that have had some longevity, like you kind of mentioned. I mean, Golden State's already looking like one of the best teams in the league. Um, the Celtics, the Bucks. I personally think the Hawks, with the addition of just Dejounte Murray, already look like they're kind of just getting back to where they kind of left off in the previous season. Um, I would say besides that though, I do like how the Cavs are looking. I think Donovan Mitchell has stringed together quite a few good games right now. Um, and yeah, I would say those are my teams right now. I think another team that, maybe just hasn't started off well, but is concerning is the 76ers. I know
Well, I
that
was
they
gonna
had,
say,
I mean, I know they had two tough matchups in the Celtics and the Bucks, but I just think it's not an excuse given, the matchups.
yeah,
I think they definitely should have lost to the Spurs. Um, so that really raises some eyes, and I just think if they're not trying to string it together in the regular season, especially against teams like that, then it is concerning because this is a team that's at the end of the process now. Like there's no trust the process anymore. That era is over. So
yeah.
I do think they need to.
The process is able to vote and shit. That's how
Yeah,
long that shit's been going on.
yeah. They should be ready to fucking win a chip, honestly. And they have the team to win a chip, but it really doesn't seem like they're showing up at the end of games to do that.
Yeah, no. To expand on that, it's looking very shaky to say the least. Obviously, it's the first 3 games, so you take all that with the biggest grain of salt you can. But when I watched that first Sixers game where it was them in Boston, they were keeping pace. I think for the first bit, trading bucket for bucket at least. Tobias Harris had a super solid showing. Joel Embiid
Yeah,
got going a little late, but James Harden looked like vintage James Harden. And I'm gonna just say it like this: if that's how the Sixers play, they're fucked. I think James Harden really needs to be sort of this third option and be the main sort of facilitator. Like when you see, or that's not really how the Suns run it, but I think that's when they're most effective when you got guys like Devin Booker and DeAndre Ayton leading the charge. I think it needs to be a similar sort of what's the word dynamic where James Harden is not necessarily hunting shots. He's looking to set everybody up, and then when the time comes, he can cook anybody. And then it's just a lot of isolation ball with them. There were
yeah,
multiple times where it was only really Harden or Embiid getting a touch, and them two men gaming it, which you love to see. That's effective for sure, but it's it's looking like very very ineffective basketball when it comes to the playoffs. I think looking at the roster moves they made, it's a lot of you're going back to something that was kind of successful, but in the grand scheme of not winning a championship, can't be named that because they're looking like the Philadelphia Rockets, Daniel
yeah,
House, PJ Tucker, all that, and yeah, it's just with the way they play basketball. There's no doubt they can string off wins, no for sure about that, but when we're gonna head to the playoffs, which I'm not even thinking about because I want to enjoy this little regular season we got going on, they're gonna get cooked. There's gonna be a time where whether James Harden's hamstring gives out again or Joel Embiid has another injury, they just are playing like a team that's not a team. It's literally Joel Embiid and James Harden go get the buckets. Everybody else kind of getting where you fit in. When you
yeah,
have a budding star like Tyrese Maxey, not the best. I'm not gonna lie. This little passionate part is coming a bit because I got Maxey and I think both my fantasy teams, if not like my first one that I'm kind of keeping track of. And I want to see this man average 20. I think he has the ability to do that, but that's only if I think Harden really buys into that facilitator role. When I think he should only take over when everybody else is shitting the bed. I don't think there should ever be a time where Harden takes like for example 10 shots and a half, maybe
yeah,
maybe even a quarter. But I just think that they need to settle down a bit and like I don't want to tell James Harden to slow down because obviously he's not going to do that, but gotta slow down a bit. I think they really gotta get everybody else more involved rather than letting them get their shots off in catch and shoot scenarios or quick little handoffs, whatever it may be. But
mm,
there's no doubt I think they'll get it together. But these first 3 games, I think, are just signs of something that needs to get handled with early. And that's again just
yeah,
getting everybody more involved, not being a very heliocentric offense.
yeah. I think one more thing to add too, and I think it's really notable and kind of plays into what you said, but I think the biggest thing I've noticed so far is that three teams they've lost to all have some sort of identity or system that they play around,
Good
right?
point. Yeah.
And I think that is like why they have lost is because they cannot necessarily be have their own identity or have something that they play around. Because in my mind, you're totally right. Like I think James Harden doesn't need to slow his well, in some sense he does need to slow his game down, but he really needs to focus on kind of moving the ball around the floor more. Because I mean, he does have players who are competent enough to kind of make that work, right? PJ Tucker is percentage in a percentile kind of conversation is one of the best corner shooters that the league has ever seen. They have players like you mentioned, like Tyrese Maxey, who can really just create his own shot. To find players like that on the floor, mixed with obviously Joel Embiid, who's really all around the best stretch player, I think, in the game right now. Um, I just think they need to like obviously find their offensive identity, and it is a little alarming when you kind of like see that this is where they're starting off when really they had James Harden for almost half of the season last season, if I'm not mistaken. Like
I think maybe a
maybe
bit less, but
30
yeah.
games. Yeah, sure. But I definitely think they had something going, and it seems like they've kind of like tried to focus more on James Harden. Um, and I think that's really taking away from what was kind of working in the beginning of or the end of last season, um, where it was like really just like really back and forth pick and roll offense that had a lot of um, like shifting and kind of sorry, I'm just like at a loss for words, but like pretty much pushing it out to other players on the floor, right? Like it was like pick and roll with Joel, where he would kind of set that for James Harden, and it would be James Harden finding his shot or finding someone else on the floor. Like that was working, or he'd throw a lob up to Joel. Like I just think that right now they're playing, like you mentioned, a lot of ISO ball, which is unhealthy basketball, and it will not ever win a championship, as you've seen it with James Harden in the past.
Amen. Yeah, I like the point you brought up where the teams that they've played all have identities. I mean, even the Spurs, we know that Pop's going to keep everybody honest. It's not going to be anybody one man show. But
Yeah.
I mean, I think the thing that really set it off. This is the last thing I think we'll say about the Sixers, unless you got anything to add. That one possession, the one I'm talking about with James Harden gave Marcus. I think it was Marcus Smart. It looked like vintage Harden where he went on some Wesley Johnson shit, but missed that shit. So I think
Oh yeah,
again,
okay.
it's something they'll get back together, but this is something you can't necessarily sweep under the rug, especially considering that I think a lot of people had Philly as the top of the East, mainly because they're going to be the ones that are gunning for it. Obviously, I think the Celtics know that, you know, you obviously no doubt want to be competitive, but you don't got to be first. You just got to get into that top six that really matters. Same with Milwaukee. I think they're these teams that, like you said, they have their identity. They know what they want to achieve, and while having the top of the conference is cool and all, it's not like priority number one. I think.
Yeah, 100%. I think no, I don't have anything to add. I think it'll be interesting to watch the Sixers this season. I think they are like, in my opinion, one of the bigger teams to watch because I think they really need to start putting. I mean, they don't need to start putting it together. They really need to put it together this season.
No doubt, they're definitely a team that has the most pressure. But switching off from that, I think another team we can talk about is maybe the Nets. They're looking very mid. I think. You know,
Yeah, uh, it's hard. It's hard to kind of nitpick the Nets right now. I think
because there's so many injuries. Yeah.
there is. Um, I think Ben Simmons, for what it's worth, came back at an okay level. I mean, I think it's warranted that he's definitely not going to come up to game speed very quickly. But it kind of, in my mind, is like pre-reminiscent of like how Clay Thompson started last year.
Mm.
Just kind of coming off such a long span, like kind of playing his game, and obviously, I think he had a 10 assist game last game, if I'm not mistaken, or maybe 8 assists, 9 assists.
He had a
But a
6,
high
10,
assist
and
game.
8. against the Raptors.
Okay. Yeah, and I mean that kind of sounds like it's almost just like below average for Ben Simmons at his kind of best, right? Obviously with a bit more points, maybe, but I think granted, yeah, he just hasn't played for a while. Um, I think my evaluation of them would be that I think it would to be stay the course, and I think they'll definitely like improve during the season. Um, and I think it's just like building up the confidence in Ben Simmons mostly, because that's like the biggest, in my opinion, what if on their team right now. Um, I mean, Kyrie Irving and Kevin Durant are gonna be Kyrie Irving and Kevin Durant, and obviously they'll come with their kind of baggage, but I think that will only come if they kind of just like coach or direct the team wrong. I think they have to keep Ben Simmons confident and just keep the game going because they have the capabilities, and I think they just need to like play games together, and that's the biggest thing.
100%. Yeah, when it comes to Brooklyn, I don't think they're going to be any good until around sort of the Christmas time. I think, like you said, there's a lot of, they haven't been able to really mesh together as a group. You know, Seth Curry hasn't played any games. Joe Harris played his first game the other day, but he was still looking like a shell. And yeah, I think it's something that really only improves over time with getting reps. And I mean, a fully healthy, like everybody on their P's and Q's nets, no doubt they're a team that I think can come out the East like fully healthy. Everybody on their shit, especially Ben, because you know, obviously all the jokes have been said, but at the end of the day, when he was at, I don't even want to say his prime because he's about to enter, you would think, but Ben Simmons is an all NBA defender and is another one of those guys like Giannis and Bam and Robert Williams that can guard 1 through 5. And you put that on a team with two of the best scorers to ever play the game, scary hours. I will say though, I think they stacked it a little bit like this, but either way, I hope that they continue, or at least I haven't watched too many of the Nets games, caught like little glimpses here and there, but I like the idea of stacking the minutes where obviously you start the three stars together, but I like taking Ben out. Oh, I like taking Ben out a little earlier so that he can really get time with that second unit. So whether he can play like the point forward, which he already kind of does, but allow him to really just focus on being a guard and nothing else really. I mean, can you imagine? The lineup would probably be shit. Obviously Seth, Joe Harris. What other shooters? That Royce O'Neal's actually playing pretty solid to start the year. I think you obviously have Ben, and then maybe Kai or somebody else that's a solid shooter. Because I don't like the idea of Claxton and Ben on this court together. But if there's anybody that's on the hot seat, it's Steve Nash. And once he gets all his pieces back together, I'm sure he'll be able to make something out of it. Because as much as we give him shit, he I've come to the realization that he's I don't want to say he's done best with what he has, because what he had was three of the greatest players to ever play the game, and that was a second round exit. But when you take everything in context, he's done what he can. I hope he doesn't get fired, but if there's anybody that is going to get fired, I think it's him. But we'll see. Do you think the Nets are for sure top six, or you think there's a chance of them falling to the play-in?
I was, I think I've been thinking, and I watched um, Kenny Beecham's video on this, like kind of ranking the his projection, and I think it's pretty accurate. Like I have the Celtics at the top in my opinion, and then I do have the Bucks. Um, the 76ers probably intermingle with the Bucks, so maybe for second and third. Um, and then it gets interesting because you have teams like the Heat, the Bulls, if they're healthy, um, and the Cavs. Did I say the Cavs? No.
No, not yet, but
But yeah, like those three teams, like the Cavs, the Bulls, the Heat, they're all teams that are kind of poised to obviously kind of, I think, mingle with the 5 through 8, like kind of positioning. So I don't have them, I think, scratched in for the top 6 seeds just yet. I think they could definitely be the team though, in terms of like what the Celtics did last year, where the second half of the season they really start to turn it around and really to make some noise. Because I mean, we've already saw that in past seasons with this current roster, or at least the remaining of the current roster. Like obviously with Kyrie and Kevin Durant, where they had like large spurts of wins. I think they could do that on a more consistent basis and really take over the second half of the season. Um, so you know what? I'm gonna go ahead and say they're gonna be in the top 6. I'm just gonna say it.
Yeah, you know what? Me too. And you know who might fall out of that? Ruben's team. Nah, I don't want to send strays at Ruben's team when he's not here to defend himself. But
I don't think the Raptors are gonna be a top 6 team, respectfully, Ruben.
what do you think about the Raptors though? We'll give Ruben's team some love here.
I think they look relatively good, but I think the personnel in the East has just gotten that much better to a point where even with the amount of cohesion the Raptors have, I do think they're a team that's going to mingle with the 5 through 8 slot as well. Um, but I do have them projected more close to 7 or 8 right now, personally. Um, just because I think they don't have enough, firepower to really get past those tougher matchups. Um, to a point where, yeah, I think they're going to be like not necessarily going on huge winning sprees, but neither long losing sprees. I think they'll be a slightly above 500 team, if I'm guessing. Yeah.
Yeah, 100%. I like your point where despite the cohesion, the East has just gotten that much better, and I think they're gonna fall victim to that a little bit. But Pascal Siakam, whew, he is playing like an all NBA player right now. He had a triple double the other day. He almost had 50 with that game as well. Like,
Yeah.
all they're really missing is just a true center. And I think that's why Coloco's gotten a bit of burn. Well, that and Chris Boucher's out for a bit. And it's just so frustrating because it's like, it's the one thing they're missing. But at the same time, I think it's something that's almost pretty, you would could say rare in a sense where, you know, no doubt there's no lack of 7 footers who are like decent size and stuff like that. But I think finding that player that can really mesh with the Raptors system, i.e., a Marc Gasol, a Serge Ibaka, somebody that isn't solely just there to just be the conventional center. I think that's what their reason why they haven't necessarily made the move for somebody. A lot of these centers that are on the market, I think. But yeah, I agree. Probably around 5 to 8. Yeah, I'd probably stick them more in the play-in though. Last little thing before we get out of here, who are some of the players that you're keeping an eye on, and how are you feeling about them? Whether it's players that are on your fantasy team that you're keying in on because of that, or whatever it may be. Who are some of the guys that you want to talk about?
Personally, not even because he's on my fantasy team, but I've just had him like as a kind of breakout player for the years. Probably Keldon Johnson. I mean, in his first 2 games, he's already showed up enormously. I mean, just pull out his averages right now, averaging about 21, 7 rebounds, close to 4 assists, and 1.5 steals. I mean, he's definitely improved his numbers already from the past season by pretty much every mark. And obviously, it has a lot to do with his usage rate, but I think he is definitely trying to be like known as a player around the NBA, and I think that's what he's going to do this season. And I think he's kind of pretty much sliding into what Dejounte Murray was doing this season. I think another player for me that I want to have high hopes for is Colin Sexton. I think it's really unfortunate the like kind of cards he was dealt, because obviously he went through season-ending injury and then got traded off
No doubt. This
to
this
a
is
team.
this is a guy that won. Do you remember that game? Did you ever hear about that game in Alabama where he almost won when it was like 3-on-5 or whatever? There's that,
I think
and
I have heard that
yeah,
story.
and the
Yeah,
fact that the the Nets' big three record was, I think, what, 13-3. One of those losses from Colin Sexton alone when he put that fucking backpack on.
I think it's unfortunate because like it's almost reminiscent of what happens to a lot of guards in this league is like one injury and you really like you have to reprove yourself. I think it's very different with the 3 through 5 position where out of respect to like the players who play that sort of role, I think it is a slower game for them in some sense, and so you kind of see like power forwards, small forwards come back to the game, and they don't really miss a beat because they're not really expected to necessarily handle the ball and take on all that pressure. Like players like Paul George, Kawhi Leonard. I mean, LeBron's missed time, but it's LeBron. But you have seen a lot of players who play those larger positions and they don't necessarily kind of get you know unconsidered from the league. They show up and they kind of play ball. Colin Sexton's put up huge numbers over his first few years, and he's one of those players who's now in a in like what we could consider like a poverty franchise at the moment. Not in terms of like obviously the the state they're in. It's a great franchise in itself, but they are a rebuilding team, and he's getting close to less than 20 minutes right now where really he should have been a starting point guard on most teams nowadays, right? So I
No
think the
doubt.
guard position is a it's a pressure sensitive role. You saw it with even Isaiah Thomas. I mean, that story always just makes me like sick in my stomach because that's someone who like went from averaging 27 points per game to like not even have a job in the league in like 4 seasons. And yeah, I hope the best for him. I think he will show up this season.
Hey, give him Wembenyama, they go do something crazy. But yeah, anybody else to like show some love to?
Uh, I think it's a Jason Tatum MVP season personally.
Oh, the dark horse.
I personally think it's just that time for him. I think the Celtics are, in my opinion, going to end up at the top of the East, and he's going to. I feel like he's already like showing mid-season form. I mean, I keep up with Jason Tatum as much as I virtually can, considering my schedule. And the guy hasn't really taken a lot of time off. He's been practicing throughout the off season. He's been showing up and he's been like really supporting his team all throughout. I mean, just from the clips and whatever. I mean, the Celtics media team is showing, but um, I think he really wants it. I think he's matured as a player too, and I think he is also able to show up in those harder moments. So yeah, I I think we'll come back to this take in a few months, and I'll be saying I told you so.
Would you put money on it?
Oh shit! Look, I don't got a lot of money, but I'd put down like $10 on it, maybe.
I respect that. No, yeah, I if there's one thing the NBA loves, it's a good story. You know, Giannis Antetokounmpo, back-to-back MVPs when he was looked at as like the skinny skeleton who would maybe be a rotational player. Nikola Jokic, the guy who got picked during a fucking Taco Bell commercial. And now Jason Tatum, the St. Louis Kobe prodigy, you know, one of the best players to ever come out of like that city. And now he's forced to lead a team that is without their supposed leader. And I 100%, I'll get on that train. You know, I think, yeah, again, the Bucks aren't really going to give a fuck about the regular season, but no doubt the Celtics are coming for blood this year. And I think not only that, with the additions they've made, it's just going to make Jason Tatum's job easier. I think we're really going to see him flourish as a playmaker in a sense too. You know, obviously he's there to get the buckets, but when he's able to pass it off at times to Malcolm Brogdon instead of Marcus Smart, even though, you know, Marcus Smart's great and all, it's going to be nice. You know, I might put some money on the JT train. I respect that. Because it's, I think you said what earlier? He's at like 35, 40, and 35 these past 3 games or something like that.
Uh, uh, let me pull this up. Let me fact check this real quick because I've chosen first in my fantasy. Oh, he's first in fantasy. Sorry. Yeah, 40, 29, and 35.
Those are MVP numbers for sure, no doubt. And I think when
Yeah.
you have voters fatigue in play as well, if there's anybody that can dethrone Jokic early right now, 3 games in, Jason Tatum is for sure that guy. I think I'll hop on that train with you. And even
Hell
Ruben
yeah.
was the first of us to really say it. I think wasn't he? And like one of our
I think we did mention it like in a very earlier episode.
yeah,
Pretty sure.
like back when we still did Take of the Days. We might bring that back, but yeah, no. Yeah, that's a good way to end off of your side for me. First player I'm gonna show love to is somebody that all three of us on the podcast love and adore. It's Christian Wood, baby. 25 points in his first two games, or 25 apiece. I mean, this dude's offense. Obviously lacking a little bit on the defense, but I think when you look at Christian Wood's career, he's never been in any good situations. This is like Detroit pre-Cade. When he was with the Bucks, didn't really get that much burn. In Houston, he went from sort of the second option with one of the best guards to ever play to now he's like sort of the big bro when that was never really should have been him in that situation. I think having to step up to that when you were obviously not expecting it kind of led him to be looked at as a bit of an asshole in the media. And
Yeah.
now we're seeing what happens when this man plays meaningful minutes with a meaningful team. I love to see it. He's definitely looking well. Tyler Hero started the past few games, so we might be able to like fully cut him out. Jordan Poole's got off to somewhat of a slow start, not as like dominant as think people would expect. Christian Wood, 6 man of the year, put that shit down. I mean, that first game, I think it was what he had 16 points straight or something like that. This dude's Christian Wood's that guy for sure.
I agree. I mean, not to add on too much, but I've personally been high on Christian Wood since Detroit. Like,
Yeah,
I think he showed huge spurts since then. I think he's personally like one of the better centers, like one of the best offensive centers in the league. Period. I think he, like, obviously plays like more in the sense as a four, like in terms of size and kind of how his game is revolved around. But he is definitely, just off the top of my head, I'd probably rank him in terms of offensive centers. I'd probably safely
I
rank him
think
in
he's
the
top
top
five.
five.
Yeah,
Yeah, 100%.
strictly offensive game.
Yeah.
Hundies. And
All
then
right, go
another
on.
guy, another rookie, I guess, Canadian brother. I'll show him some love. Benedict Mathurin. This guy's instant offense. 19, 26, 27. Again, all those three were against teams that have been on the lower tier. We'll see what he does in his next game, which is against Philly. But I love Benedict Mathurin, man. When you look at him, not only as a Canadian, but him as the overall hooper, you love to see it. I mean, this guy's a bucket. What can I say? And when you look at again, when you look at to the Olympic time, throw him in that squad, some nice shit might happen. I'll say that. And the other guy, a bit of a slower start than like what you would hope, but I think it's Franz Wagner. I said on the earlier episode, him and Paulo, 100% could be one of the best like wing duos in the league in the next coming years. And even if you add Wendell Carter Jr. to that mix, make that one of like the best trios. And if they continue this way, okay, here's a crazy segue. If you're the Magic and you have the first pick, do you pick Wembanyama when you have all that size already?
That's tough because in my head, like, there's a yes and no. Like, there's yes and no are both right answers. Like Webinyama is like so generational, and people have literally been saying like, if Webinyama and LeBron James were in the same draft today, who would you take? And people would literally say Webinyama. Like, people are like sucking his dick. Like, they are
The sack
slopping on
riding
it.
is for real.
Like, I just don't. I don't think I'm
You
on
don't
that
you
level.
don't believe? Because I'm not
I
gonna lie,
believe in Web.
I'm not the biggest believer. Just because you see him all do all this crazy like bing bing bullshit, but those are also against the other bigs.
Yeah,
Which, when you think in the NBA, sure it might work against like a Jonas Valanciunas because he's not the fastest with his feet. But throw him in front of Bam, Giannis, or like Robert Williams the third, that motherfucker's getting clapped. I feel though.
yeah. He just doesn't like scream to me as like generational talent when you think of like a complete player. Like I personally think LeBron James was generational talent because this dude was like 6'9", 250 coming into the league. Like he is like a linebacker, like with basketball technical skills, you know? Like to me, Wembanyama obviously is 7'4", but we've seen tons of skinny 7'4" players come into the league. And maybe they didn't have like the dribble that Wembanyama has or like the fadeaway, but like even those players like had limitations, you know? So I just don't know if I'm really sold on him. So I would take Scoot. I definitely take Scoot because that he, in my opinion, is like the instant offense that they need right now. Because I think that's how they've been losing games personally. Is that their guard play has not really been, carrying the rest of the team. Because Paulo's obviously been the one scoring the ball. I think he's probably has the highest averages on that team right now. And I mean, Terrence Ross is even getting burned at this point because
Terrence Ross is
Cole
cooking.
Anthony. Yeah, I picked him up for fantasy this next week because I think he's gonna be nice for at least a week. But Cole Anthony and Jalen Suggs is injured, but Jalen Suggs personally is not even it. Like he's already, in my opinion, he's already bust. Maybe I'm wrong, but I personally think
Damn.
he's bust.
Damn. That's a hot take. Man, no,
I just think he did not show up at all last season. Like he's one of those players who was definitely forgettable, and maybe he could have a comeback season, but I think we've said that about a lot of like I mentioned, the guard play in the NBA is the most competitive position. If you don't offer something on the table, I think you're going international.
damn. I wouldn't say all that. I agree. I don't think he got drafted to the right situation just because you're
That's
playing
true.
with like Markel and Cole Anthony already. Like, if there's a player from the 2021 draft that I'm betting money will be traded to another situation, I might put my money on Suggs.
Good
I,
opinion.
I, again, this might be a little me of sack riding or whatever, but when I watched that game against UCLA, I cried a bit of a tear when he hit that fucking shot. You know, he came into the NBA with all this hype, and now he's not necessarily delivering. He's had spurts for sure, but
Yeah,
I think it's just with the role he plays and what his game is. I think that's the main thing with the Magic too. It's a lot of guys who like to score buckets, and then everything else comes second. I think you see
yeah.
Paulo is able to somewhat balance it with he's had multiple assist games for sure. Franz is starting to develop that a bit, but again, it's when you have like five guys who only want to score the basketball. Well, it's not necessarily going to flow as well. It looks like we were talking with the Sixers earlier, but yeah, this is all just to say when Benyama's not here. Nah, but yeah, I here's another little tangent. If you're the Magic, do you trade that pick then? Like
If I'm trading them,
if who's not that who's two would like I don't know if this ever happened in the NBA, but I know it's for sure happened in like other leagues where one and two get traded for each other. You think there might be a thing like that?
I personally don't know if it would be something like that because I mean, in a situation where you trade one and two, I mean, let's say in a situation where it's the Magic and
Let's say
probably the Thunder.
the Thunder or the Spurs. Yeah.
Yeah, I wouldn't really necessarily look to either of those teams for a player that I would want from that roster, because I don't think there's like amount of draft compensation that you can really have when you're trading already like a current pick. Because usually I find it's players that do get traded for draft picks.
Mm,
Um, so that being said, I think they could trade the draft pick, but I think it would be for like a star that somewhat aligns with their current roster makeup because they're really only a couple pieces away from being like a team that could really compete, considering how they're kind of flowing right now. That being said, I don't really know who that player is. I mean, I'm trying to think of just looking at all these current teams, but yeah, I think it's a trade for a player more so.
mm. Nah, I respect that, but yeah, we going on a lot of multiple tangents here. This started with Franz Wagner, I think, needing a little time to adjust, but you know, it's the blacktop, baby. We do what we want, and I think that's I guess another dude I showed love to it earlier. Just real quick, Anthony Simons again. hasn't had the best shooting splits, but again, it's those ugly games that I really look at where you're performing when shit's not going right, and he's been able to really do that. And I think playing beside a guy like Dame, definitely doing measures for him for sure. You've seen how he's really grown in the past few seasons, and he's another guy that you could slot into MIP in a sense. But we'll see what he's able to do when he's like playing with the likes of Josh Hart, who's really opened his offensive game since joining that team. Jeremy Grant has been super solid. Yusuf Nurkic is even looking he's coming off of that little Euro basket thing he came in. And when it comes to just the Portland Trailblazers in general, again, I think they're a sleeper. They don't even have their primary stopper in Gary Payton Jr., Gary Payton the third or second, whatever, GP2. So Anthony Simons may or may not be that guy. But that's going to do it for another episode of the Black Top Podcast. Christian, got any last little thing to say?
No, I don't. Jason Tatum for MVP.
Hundies Dundies. Ruben was not here today, so bro, we miss you. Hope you're here for the next one. But with that being said, stay safe, stay blessed. We'll see y'all soon. Back shots, back shots, back shots, back shots.